truly, I came because you guys are here, but I was truly, totally freaked out that Ocean was here. I'll tell you why in a minute. And Brooke and Thomas were here, and I know I missed some of the speakers yesterday who were here. I mean, this is a quality faculty, and truly very, very excited to be part of it. I just briefly grew up in Detroit in a traditional, actually Jewish home keeping kosher. So there was a line, you eat this, you don't eat that. It's a lot like being plant-based or vegan or vegetarian. There's just a thought for a minute. And the first day of undergrad, Ann Arbor, 1977, 41 years ago, walking into the dormitory cafeteria with my cute little girlfriend, who's been my wife for 37 years, we said, we didn't know what to call it. We're salad baratarians, and we stuck with salad baratarian because about a week later she said, I feel better. I think, you know, my mother's cooking and your mother's cooking, it wasn't the spices. I think it's like the dairy or something that we were eating because we had already abandoned that, and we just never changed. But nothing really progressed far till 1987 when I was on my way with my wife to Maroon Bells in go a little mountain climbing, and somebody, some angel somewhere handed me a copy of a book called A Diet for a New America. I truly have no idea who handed it to me. I didn't buy it. I now have many copies in my office. Very sentimental to me to see that white and red and kind of, I think it's perhaps green title and cover. But it just laid the case out, and I got fired up, man. This was maybe something. I was already a cardiology fellow, Dallas, Texas, trying to eat okra in the Dallas VA in South Dallas, if anybody knows Dallas. A lot of okra I ate. I was going to throw those away. You win. And then really, 1990, a paper was published. I was practicing cardiology 3 weeks, and a paper was published July 21, 1990, by a guy I never heard of, Dr. Dean Ornish, but I knew the other people on the paper. I said, shoot, I read John Robbins, I read Dean Ornish. The world has just concluded that we're going plant-based, that cardiologists are going to teach, you know, nutrition and diet and the role of fruits and vegetables, legumes and whole grains. And you know, we're still waiting for that moment, but it really is what Michael Clapper says. I say it a little differently. He says, you know, it's the food. I say it's the fucking food because it's so simple. It is so simple that we can so catapult our health and catapult the health of our country and catapult the health of our waters and catapult the health of our air and catapult kindness. And it's so simple. We debate it and we fight it and we challenge each other, and it's truly worth doing this because it is so ugly out there and it's very confusing. And today you open the LA Times and you'll see a woman who hates me desperately by the name of Nina Teichels because I beat her up like nobody beats her up for talking about meat-based diets and never considering the environment, never considering the animals, and truly never considering the science, as at least I read it. And she's in the LA Times telling everybody to do animal-based low-carb diets, ketogenic diets, as if it was concluded that this is actually the science. So we're here. We're going to have some fun. I'll go quick. I want to leave some time for questions. And I have a button, and I'm over here. If you don't know my bio, I do own now actually 3 restaurants, 2 in Detroit and a food truck in Austin, Texas. If you're going to be in this thing, you're in this thing. So I call them my 401 cafes. You know, my money goes where your mouth is, but we have family business going on that's doing extremely well. We're changing Detroit's culture through food. We also have in Detroit the world's largest nutrition support group that I founded with a patient 4 years ago for 20 people. Now there's 5,200 people. We have Colin Campbell speaking next week, and he's been in many times. And anybody, we're just talking to Thomas Tadlock and Brooke Goldner Tadlock and hooking them up with Baxter Montgomery in Houston. You got 3 people like that, maybe 1 or 2 crazy patients, and you'll have a support group of 500 or 1,000 in Houston in a year or 2. I do want to say before I forget, Thomas, who you heard speak, I believe this morning, right as I was coming in from LAX, just found out that his book hit _1 on Amazon, Rheumatic Disease. Everybody give it up. Thomas Tadlock! So we have a celebrity, many celebrities, you're all celebrities in the room. Okay, so you probably know the answer to these questions, but what one habit is powering many, many wonderful people inside and out? March 2nd, 2018, Beyonce announces to 112 million people on Twitter that she is going plant-based for 44 days, which was leading up to Coachella. She's done this before. She, if you don't know, is co-owner of a company called 22 Days Nutrition that's completely plant-based meals and bars and powders with Marco Borges, one of the great humans in the world. She has not stopped. She's going because now she's on tour soon with Jay-Z, and they both go vegan when they're on tour because they find they perform better, they have more energy, they look better. So, you know, it may be temporary, and we always suffer that possibility that when it's announced that she's back, perhaps in a delicatessen that, you know, she abandoned. But for the meantime, that is one of the most powerful cultural changes that's happened. That book she wrote the intro to, and it's a wonderful book if you've never seen it, along with the website 22 Days Nutrition. Kyrie Irving of the Celtics. I mean, what is going on in Detroit? We have a player just traded to the Clippers, Tobias Harris, and in my restaurants we have Red Wings, and we have occasionally Theo Riddick. He plays for the NFL, plays for the Detroit Lions, if anybody plays for the Detroit Lions, but Theo's doing actually really well, strong, plant-based, and it's really catching attention. You'll see later this year a movie coming out from the Game Changers. You've heard of that? Yeah, James Cameron and a lot of other very powerful people. Used to be the 300-pound vegan, but he's so fit now. He's now just David Carter, a wonderful human being. I think it's going to change a lot of people's mind, this whole insane question, where do you get your protein? I mean, these guys, and we can talk about that maybe during the questions. You know, world's strongest man, what the heck is his diet plan? Why are we spending time? Why don't we just do yoga or sing Kumbaya? Forget this, because it really is resolved in my mind. And then there's a topic that's never discussed, at least not frequently that I can recall, in Paleo FX and in the ketogenic world and in the world that gets in the LA Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Time Magazine, and huge attention, which is this issue of, you know, there is a choice we have every day. We got 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day, your preference, to make a stand that I am not for butchery. I am not for cruelty. I am going to make a choice on my plate. Peace begins in the kitchen. That's LA Crossroads. I wore that t-shirt last night in my restaurant. If you've never been to Crossroads on Melrose, please drive up there, go eat there, and stay in Melrose and go over to Gracias Madre. Pretty awesome choices there in Melrose. And then there's really this issue that Ocean spoke so well to, that, you know, we don't have plan B, we have planet A, and unless we're going to the moon with Naveen Jain and some other visionaries, Peter Diamandis, we got this planet, and it's scary. It's scary for those of us that have children and think about grandchildren, and, you know, the waters in Lake Michigan's full of, as we just heard, PCBs, and he actually metformin. I mean, we had state of Michigan, Flint, terrible tragedy with babies that'll be challenged for the rest of their life by certainly a variety of changes. But if the Flint River hadn't have been so dirty, and only part of that is animal agriculture, a lot of that was the former auto industry and such, but nonetheless, we can make a change. We know it's the most powerful. Maybe it hasn't been said this conference. It's great if you drive a Prius or a Volt. It's more important that you don't buy meat, chicken, eggs, and cheese in terms of your greenhouse gas, and we'll come back to that. It's a more powerful percentage out there. So there is that one thing, and that one thing is fill your plate with gorgeous food. You'll feel better. You'll make a difference in the world. You make a difference for kindness. It's so simple. It is just so straightforward, and, you know, there just doesn't need to be much more conversation. But let's go a little further. So in 1944, if you didn't know it, Donald Watson in England and a few other people got together and said, we really are opposed to animal cruelty for our diet, and we're going to start up a movement. And it was the first use of the word vegan, because they made up the word. They were going to call it Dairy Ban Society and some other names, but they didn't have Instagram story videos to say, do you like dairy ban? Yes, no, boom. You know, you could do a poll right now, but they came up with the word vegan. We've suffered with it ever since, but we got it, you know, and it was really at that point on the idea, because health data, who had health data in 1944? We actually had health data right after that. But nonetheless, about animal rights and all, the great Mr. Rogers said, don't eat anything with a mother. It was just Mother's Day, and I posted this on Instagram and got a lot of reaction, because when you think about it, it's Mother's Day for everybody, not just for mom. And, you know, when you have a Mother's Day meal with broiled chicken, somebody didn't have a really good Mother's Day that day. But I like this the best. It's just straightforward. Go through the grocery store. Just put this on your phone. Can I buy it? Nope. Pooped. Can't buy it. Why would you want to buy anything that pooped? It's just not a very nice thought. So we've got a poop-free plan to save the world, and I suggest you just embrace it. And yeah, it's so simple. So let's talk about heart disease first, because we've got this diet that, you know, again, 1990, July 21, the journal was Lancet. The main author was Dr. Dean Ornish in Sausalito, California, still a young, energetic man doing research. But at this point, he was very young, and he changed the world for cardiologists, and a few people got it. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time to get it at the very beginning of my career. About a dozen years ago, Dr. Kim Williams, who is at Rush University in Chicago, and now there are 9 totally plant-based cardiologists at Rush, which is the largest number in any academic medical center in the United States, maybe the world. But, you know, he was caught off mic with this statement 12 years before he had changed his diet because he was struggling with his cholesterol, struggling with his blood pressure. He's a world-famous tennis player. He figured, you know, exercise will do everything for me, and it wasn't. And he made that change and saw the results and started teaching it and got pushback, teaching pushback, until he rose to the president of the American College of Cardiology. So he's famous for this statement, and there's one other statement I want you to remember, which is the statement that I don't mind dying, I just don't want it to be my own fault. And that has become a meme you can buy on mugs and pillows and T-shirts that came out of Dr. Williams' mouth, a man with incredible intellect and also a great sense of humor and a good friend. He spent a few years in Detroit and still has grandkids in Detroit. But that's it. There's only 2 kinds, and it's, you know, how many cardiologists and how many psychiatrists and how many gastroenterologists and on are plant-based. Distressingly few. And it'll change. It'll get better. The medical students are much more open-minded to it. They see what's going on with Beyonce and Kyrie and the whole evolution and the social media. But let's talk about arteries. Thomas Sidingham. 400 years ago, he was called the English Hippocrates. He wrote a textbook that for 200 years was the medical textbook that was used throughout Europe. And he had this vision to say, if you would know the age of a person's arteries, you can know how old their body is. So this is a great reflector, which is a very inconvenient thing to pick because you can't see arteries with any regularity. But nonetheless, he had done a bunch of autopsies. I have no idea why there's a map of Saudi Arabia there. This was a slide stolen, you know, off the web. Probably it was given at a lecture in Riyadh, but he didn't live there. He lived in London, and he is worthy. There's a disease called Sidingham's chorea. He's still in the literature in terms of an eponym. But in terms of this, you know, I am a heart doctor, and I'm going to spend 5 minutes teaching a little bit about cardiology that could literally save your life. Then we'll go back to plant-based, because plant is the solution, even if the problem might exist. I've been very lucky to be plant diet-based for 41 years. Some of you will say I've done it for, you know, 3 days, 41 days, 4 years, and I'm not insulated and protected from it, and you're not either, particularly if, you know, on your diet, where some of the foods we know are associated with developing cardiovascular disease, and it wasn't that long ago. So that's called The Widowmaker. There happens to be a great documentary on Netflix called The Widowmaker Movie. I encourage you to take a minute and watch sometime The Widowmaker Movie. That's what you don't want to have walking around not knowing, get on vacation, on the tennis court, on the squash court, during some sexual frenzy or something. It's not a good time to find out that you got it. So here's clue number 1, and nobody can look at their person to the right, person to the left, or take out a makeup mirror and look right now. Look later. But 45 years ago, Dr. Frank in New York City published a small article in a journal called New England Journal of Medicine that in his observation, if you had a crease in your earlobe, you probably had clogged heart arteries. And it was published, and it was New England Journal of Medicine. He had some reason to believe it. It was kind of lost till we got the new technology called CAT scans of heart arteries. In the last 5 years, there are multiple studies that have confirmed that funny little finding on Steven Spielberg's handsome ear identifies with about 70% accuracy a potentially seriously blocked heart artery. Now, a stress test is 70% accurate, or you can look at your earlobes. And I'm always struck in my office when I see people come in and they bring me records, they have heart disease, and I look up from the laptop, as doctors have to do now and then, and there indeed is that mark. It's not perfect. You can have it and not have heart disease. You can have smooth, lovely. There is a reason for it. It's actually a plant-based theory. Dr. Linus Pauling, PhD, who won 2 Nobel Prizes, biochemistry and the peace, and is most famous for the vitamin C story in terms of our health. Humans, I wonder, this is worth saying, there's only 4 species on the planet that can't make vitamin C. Humans, gorillas, fruit bats, and guinea pigs, which means there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mammals that can make vitamin C to their needs, like cats and dogs and squirrels and all kinds of other creatures, mice. Humans can't. So every milligram of vitamin C in your body you have to get by eating leafy greens, fruits, and vegetables, berries, and such. And it turns out arteries are made of collagen. You need vitamin C to make collagen for your arteries. Earlobes are made of collagen. You need vitamin C to make collagen for earlobes. And it may well be, the theory is, that that little sign reflects relative vitamin C deficiency, relative collagen weakness, and is the same pathology, but arteries are seeing blood full of hamburgers and hot dogs and french fries and Malta, and they'll take up little cholesterol particles where the earlobe isn't so blessed with that kind of perfusion. That's one. Number 2, we heard the term, Ocean set me up for this with canary in the coal mine. Miners used to go in the coal mine aware that carbon monoxide was odorless, tasteless, and it could explode. If the bird died in the cage, they would run out aware that there was a high carbon monoxide level. Erectile dysfunction can be that canary in the bedroom, in that a man starting to have difficulty getting and maintaining sexual response may well be having a vascular problem, may well be, the literature is 3 to 4 years away from having chest pain or actually being in an emergency room, heart attack, or even dying. It's in the urology literature for 15 years. It's in the cardiology literature. Guys, if you're having trouble and you talk to your doctor should say, get your heart checked. It doesn't happen 1 time out of 100, but it's a worthy clue. I mean, there are emotional reasons, testosterone reasons, medication side effects, but you want to know whether your arteries are clean or not. That's important. I don't care what you eat tonight, it's still an important issue. And then there's a lifestyle, because I am a lifestyle heart doc, of which the foundation is nutrition, but it's not the only factor. And the medical science, and we can add one new one to this, I'll tell you in a second, is that if you will adopt 5 habits, one of which is the core of what we're talking about today, you can drop by lifestyle your risk of heart attack so dramatically it makes your head spin. These are large studies, 40,000 people throughout Europe, men and women, don't smoke, walk every day, sleep every night. Enjoy a few little cocktails if it doesn't bother you, if you don't have issues with it. Keep them limited, which is the new data. Maybe 5 a week is the new max. But right here, this is what 1 to 2% of Americans do. Only 15 to 20% smoke, way too high. 50% of Americans exercise. This is a big problem. Everybody overdrinks. But almost nobody eats enough fruits and vegetables. And over and over and over again in studies. About 3 weeks ago, the Harvard School of Public Health said, would you like to extend your lifespan by 14 years for a woman or 12 years for a man? And what they identified in a database of, in this case, 130,000 doctors and nurses followed for 30 years. It's the Harvard Physician Health Study and the Nurses Health Study. But they found the exact same list, that the people that had these 5 habits and followed them regularly could extend their life by 12 years for a guy and 14 years for a woman, compared to somebody that practiced none of them. So the core of your life extension plan should be the middle section, because you'll do that so much better. You'll get vitamin C, you'll get strong collagen, you'll have better arteries, and the whole thing keeps rolling and rolling. Oops. But in medicine, I'm almost done with the heart topic, but I love this topic so much, and you are people with hearts, so I have to talk about it. How good is your visit to your family doctor, your internist, your nurse practitioner, your PA, or even a cardiologist at predicting? I mean, how good were we at this one? Who would have possibly guessed that Winston Churchill would have made it to that age, and Jim Fixx at age 53, the author of the book of Running in the 1970s, if you remember that, or so many others. I mean, we talk about so many other people that have dropped dead, whatever messed it up. So please, please be aware that for about $75 to $100 in your community at a local hospital, you can get a CAT scan that in 10 seconds tell you clean arteries, no calcium, little bit of problem, still a problem. You're walking around like a time bomb, the widowmaker, you're a big risk. Go get checked, get a stress test. Maybe you need more than that, and certainly get on a plant-based diet to attempt to reverse this horrible, horrible problem. It's called the coronary artery calcium score. It's a CT scan without iodine. You don't need it if you've had a bypass, a stent, a heart attack. You know you got a problem. But for about 95% of people that assume they're okay because their doctor at age 45, 50, 55 at their exam told them there's nothing wrong, I didn't hear any murmur, your EKG looks good, your blood work's pretty average. I mean, average and moderation lets people die left and right. So maybe we saved a couple lives in the last 5 minutes between earlobes and canaries and CAT scans. But we do have a problem. We spend more money by far than any country in the United States on health care. We are down here in terms of lifespan, but I want you to look right there. It looks like the sexual response of a smoker or somebody eating too much meat. It's hanging down rather limp. And for the first time, we have, in the last 2 years, seen actually a reduction in lifespan in the United States. Very concerning that all this stuff is starting to catch up. Water quality, plastics in our environment, chemicals in our lives, and food, hyper-processed with sedentary lifestyles, with a poor sleep quality, and it's starting to make a difference. It isn't the medical budget. The medical budget's going crazy, and we got robotics, and we got lasers, and we got stem cells, and all kinds of awesome things. Dr. Colin Campbell published, a wonderful author, of course, of the China study, published in the last week a scathing indictment of the cancer industry, that, you know, it's always new cancer, new stem cells, new chemotherapy, new proton X-ray therapy, but it's never a discussion about nutrition, which has the ability to, at least for a lot of cases, influence the development and the very course of cancer outcome. So it's going down. And then there's a concept you may not know about, which is called health span. Look at this statistic. We live about 30,000 days. If we're lucky, 20% of them are spent in poor health. That's the last 10 to 12 years of your life. So you have perhaps a lifespan of 80 years, but from age 68, 70, you're walking poorly, your brain's not working so well, you've forgotten what sex is, you know, you just don't feel good, your joints hurt, as opposed to trying to get to that very end and it happening quickly, and hopefully a very, you know, late point in life. So health span is not something really being discussed. We just assume in medicine, as we practice it, that these chronic diseases are just part of healthcare, and they're really not. Oops, sorry, apologize. Finally, boom, I'm having fun. We have this, you know, really phenomenal, scary situation where not long ago I entered cardiology fellowship around this time, and these are the percentage of people by state that were obese, 10% being light blue. A few had hit 10% of the population. Just look, and there's updated graphs, but over 30% of the population, not just overweight, but this is the definition of obesity. And, you know, throughout the South, it's just super prevalent, where the Tadlocks just moved is one of those spots. My very state of Michigan holds the distinction of being the northern capital of obesity. It scared the heck out of me. I was actually in West Virginia Friday testifying as an expert in court, and had way too much time in a sports bar Thursday night reading over some stuff and just hanging out and watching people eat fried food and fried food and fried food. I was absolutely gloating that their heart disease rates have to be worse than in my own home state. And then I actually pulled out the phone and looked it up, and the state of Michigan actually has a higher heart disease rate than even West Virginia. It just blows me away. And it's a whole complex situation, but it's the food and other things, but the food can change us so badly. Very cool graph by some of the smartest people I've ever met out in San Diego that looks at determinants of healthcare, a lot of which are the individual choices we make, like what we eat and how much we move and how much we sleep and what kind of water, plastic bottles. Look at medical care. You know, all those dollars you're paying for your insurance, and all those hospitals and all those ads on hospitals and all those pharma ads, of which do good things for people in emergency situations and some other situations, but it's a fraction of the overall determinant of health of what you learn at this conference and you implement, and the little gift bag you just got, and Tom Tadlock's amazing #1 best-selling book, as his wife, and all the rest. It really is the single biggest piece that you can control. It's a very complex graph. So what we need is Operation WTFU, which is wake the F up, because we do have this amazing power, and we have, you know, just this debate going on, but let's talk a little bit about it. Heart disease. Wait, do you want to go back to that? Do you want me to read that for you again? Operation, and write this down. Boys and girls, this is going on Facebook. So, How many people know about Finland? Okay, not too many. Good, I'm glad I'm talking about it. Lisa Carlin knows about Finland, of course. The late 1960s and the early 1970s, the heart attack rate in the country of Finland was the highest in the world. You're 42-year-old, you're a lumberjack, you're not overweight, and you drop dead left and right. Widows everywhere, impacting the economy of the country. They had a very special scientist who was aware of some data that was coming out of something called the 7-country study, and even Framingham. They said, we've got a problem. We need a global answer, and we're going to go to the food industry and tell them to put some beans in the sausage, because the average lunch in North Karelia, Finland, is the center of where these heart attacks were occurring. The average lunch was butter, cheese, and sausage, and then another sandwich of butter, cheese, and sausage. We're going to put beans in the sausage. We're going to put educational material in the post office and the schools. We're actually going to try and teach whoever was making dinner at home to put in more fruits and vegetables. We're going to talk about quit smoking. Within 5 years, more than half the heart attacks had dropped, and within 10 years, they were down 85%. So the rest of Finland said, we want to be part of this program, change our sausage, change our grocery stores, change our educational program. And the entire country experienced a drop of 80% in heart attacks. The side effect was cancer dropped and overall heart disease dropped and all. It was a phenomenal ongoing experiment. It's still the case that their cardiovascular disease rates have dropped phenomenally. People will argue, no, we got butter wrong, we got cheese wrong, we got eggs wrong, we got sausage wrong. You just got to come back. There's so much written. I posted an article yesterday morning on social media about Finland that was just written, because it is a untold story of extreme success. Just what you want. You want to drop your rates of developing disease of the heart and the cancer in the brain and your diabetes and the rest by numbers like that, and it's very possible. It worked for an entire country. And then we have, again, Dr. Dean Ornish, and these are photos from Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn you may have seen, but just in case you haven't seen, this is a general surgeon at the Cleveland Clinic. This is what arteries look like on an angiogram of the heart at cardiac catheterization. This surgeon could no longer operate at age 50 because he was having chest pain in the operating room. They did the angiogram, and they told him in 1996, you have a long, severe blockage in the front artery, the widowmaker artery, and it's too long at that time to do a balloon and a stent on. We're just going to have to watch you, and you're going to have to retire and take disability. And he sheepishly walked over to Dr. Esselstyn and said, I hear you're doing something. Can you help me? I don't believe in it. I'm a surgeon, but tell me what you're doing. Dr. Esselstyn's a surgeon, so there was some trust. And he adopted this complete whole food plant diet without added oils. And he happened to be one of these people that just had a repeat catheterization. It wasn't part of the study. But, as dramatic as it gets, we don't need 1,000 examples. We just need to know from the Ornish data and the Furman data and the Esselstyn data, which have grown in size to the point that Medicare only reimburses 2 programs to reverse heart disease for people that have Medicare and other insurances in the United States. One is the Ornish plant program, and one is the Pritkin plant program. There is no Mediterranean diet heart reversal program that's reimbursed by insurance companies. There is no ketogenic program reimbursed by insurance companies. There certainly is no paleo meat heavy program because there is no data for it. And they're very quiet on that topic. They're very good on six-pack topic. They're very quiet about heart artery anatomy, coronary artery disease rates, and such. It's not just heart disease, and you may not have seen this, even though this was published now about 13 years ago and repeated, that if you're a man with prostate cancer nowadays, you got about an 80% chance of not being recommended to have surgery. You get watched. They, look for the number to go up, and then they might jump in with radiation or chemotherapy or surgery at that point. So Dr. Ornish grabbed a bunch of those people and said, I'm going to treat those people being watched with the same heart program I use, plant diets, meditation, walking, social support, and indeed found that in the group that just followed with their urologist, this is at University of California, San Francisco, with a guy named John Carroll, who's the chief of urology there, one of the country's most famous urologists. Nonetheless, the PSA got worse and worse and worse over a year, except if you eat plants, particularly cruciferous vegetables. It goes down and down and down. They had MRI scans that the prostate tumor actually shrunk. And then they did some amazing work with the blood of these people. If you take the blood of a man who's been diagnosed with prostate cancer after just 3 months of eating only plants, and you drip the blood on a petri dish full of prostate cancer cells, it will kill those cells like chemotherapy, even though it's just their own blood. Because that's what you can do with antioxidant-rich, vitamin-rich, mineral-rich, phytonutrient-rich foods, they will get in your blood and they will boost your immune system, and you also not have excess sugar, fat, salt, and such in your bloodstream, and it literally will kill the prostate cancer cells. Now, I'm not dictating to anybody, stop your treatment, but you should read Ornish literature. He's unfortunately never written a book about food-based therapy of prostate cancer like he has about heart disease, but maybe that'll be coming. He does have a new book out any day. Go back. You want to live longer. I'm just having too much fun here, but that's okay. You want to live longer, perhaps. One way to gauge how long you might live is a very sophisticated measurement, not done routinely, but it can be if you pay $300, called measuring the tips of your chromosomes, measuring your telomeres. This won the Nobel Prize in Medicine a couple years ago, again, out of University of California, San Francisco. So he grabbed a bunch of men that were either on a plant diet or a regular diet, and those that were eating plants, the telomeres, a sign of youthfulness, got longer, which means their lifespan's longer, that you may actually, as we heard Gina talk about epigenetics, which is the way that we control the activity of our gene and our genome, but you may actually protect your genome from age and make it more youthful by simply adding plants. The best anti-aging program anywhere. I know you all have seen this and you've got this all figured out, but this is a phenomenal study. How long does, this is the greatest graph in the world, how long does it take for you to change your diet and there be major measurable differences? Maybe you can't measure them, but Dr. Stephen O'Keefe at the Mayo Clinic can measure them. So this was one of the greatest studies ever. You take people in South Africa that are eating rural bush diets. They're eating twigs and trees and tubers and plants, and maybe they can grab a little bug now and then. It wasn't in the cities. It was in rural South Africa. And then you take the same number of people that live in Louisiana, Mississippi, eating standard South American, Southern U.S. diets, very fried, meat-heavy, cheese-heavy, and such, and you make every measurement you can in their bloodstream and in their stool, and then you switch the diets for 2 weeks. You actually bring food fried by Paul Prudhomme and others into South Africa, and you bring this rural diet into the southern part of the United States. And within 2 weeks, there were unbelievable differences in bacterial content, the actual products that the bacteria were making. One of my favorites called TMAO and others. And I don't pretend to you to understand all this, but it graphed out in exquisite detail. You've changed your body dramatically in 2 weeks. Dr. Ornish, Dr. Esselstyn published in 3 weeks you may stop having as much angina because the lining of your arteries called your endothelium has gotten healthier and making more nitric oxide if you're eating lots of green leafies and beets and all the rest. But your entire bacterial content within your body, which is about 10 times more than your body itself in terms of DNA material and cells, starts to shift that quick. Really amazing. And just for the sake of time, I can't talk about diabetes at length, rheumatoid arthritis, and I'm sure Dr. Goldner did, asthma, overall aging, Parkinson's disease, but every one of these, osteoporosis, has increasing, never enough, but increasing data to suggest the single best decision in every regard for your health. And the debate is over, and we don't need to spend any more time on it, but we sort of do. Finally, we got the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics saying, if you really read it, they've hidden the word vegan from the title, but it's there, whether you choose a vegetarian or vegan, before conception, during pregnancy, with infants, with young kids. It has to be properly planned. You don't want to give growing children protein-deficient diets when they're infants. It becomes less a problem as they get into teen years and such. But if you properly plan it, you can do that, and it's recognized by the Dietetic Society. Just in the last few weeks, just to give you a little taste of this, right here, April 3rd, very recent, meat protein unhealthy, protein from nuts and seeds is heart smart, large study from Loma Linda and France, suggesting again that there is nothing wonderful about meat protein other than disease and the destruction of the environment. Just April 4th, it's not just any vegetables, but if you want to keep your arteries clean, be sure some of those vegetables are the green leafies, cruciferous, the brassica family, of which is about 3 dozen, all the way from wasabi to radishes, to kale, to bok choy, to Brussels sprouts, showing that, we can even get more specific in our food choices. And we're allowed to eat romaine again, but next year romaine, be sure you have a few Brussels sprouts too. Just within the last few weeks, March 21, major study from Harvard that if you looked at the saturated fat content that comes from animal products like butter, like cheese, like eating red meat, versus the saturated fat and MUFA and PUFA, mono and polyunsaturated fat makeup of plant foods, that there was a extended life and reduction in cardiovascular disease with plant fat. So we're not big advocates of fats. Again, we eat food, we don't eat fat, with the exception maybe of coconut oil, which is 100% fat, and I'm not an advocate of that. But if you do get a little plant fat, like somebody posted on my Facebook page yesterday, which happened to be my birthday, happy birthday, but you're not the most popular, you're not an avocado. So I thought that was pretty funny. Everybody loves avo, and for pretty good reason. March 20th, high consumption of red meat and alcoholic and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and insulin resistance. And you get really confused with a company called Virta Health and posting everywhere, even just recently about in type 1 diabetes and low-carb, high-fat keto diets with meat, that they were so good for so many conditions. But when you really dive into the literature, it doesn't hold up. It's headlines and it's lobby influences. An amazing graph that looks at the percentage of deaths from heart disease and cancer and the percentage of calories that come from unrefined plant foods like fruits, vegetables, legumes, and beans. The higher the percentage of calories from fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains, the lower the rates of chronic disease, and the inverse is there. I mean, that should be a t-shirt we wear proudly, because we are the green team, and we will benefit in terms of our health most likely. I love posting this on Twitter to respond to people. You can just read it. It's simply true. I mean, and I say this, it's funny. It's funny, but a friend of mine who's the head of preventive medicine at Yale, Dr. David Katz, when he argues about nutrition, and he's plant strong, plant predominant, these are silly little words, but nonetheless, he understands that meat-heavy diets are unhealthy. He talks about the fact that heart disease is not hypothetical, that we're debating, and we have advocates on late-night PBS and all over saying eat more eggs, eat more cheese, eat more meat, we messed it all up, it's all fine. We're talking about the #1 killer and the impact that's going to have on men and women across the country who get increasingly confused. And this is authentic. There's not a single case report of reversing heart disease. There's not one person who stood up and said, I can show you my stress test before and after, I can show you my catheterization before and after. It doesn't exist. And I've said it publicly, and I've said it on 1,000 podcasts. Just show me an authentic scientific study where I can feed my heart patients meat and actually prove to them that they're benefiting and their coronary arteries are improved and their heart attack risk went down. And my ethical obligation will tell them that there's a study out and they should consider it. I don't have to do that. I don't anticipate doing it. It's just a bunch of blah, 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 but it sure is noisy. Planet, nobody can talk about that better than Ocean did, but look at the Amazon in 1950 and the Amazon as it's going to look in 2 years. I mean, it's not only that many medicines come out of the Amazon and, and many of the foods we eat that we've learned to enjoy, like acai berries and others. It's just a greenhouse gas, it's animal species and the rest. Truly, a lot of this is being deforested to grow grain, to feed Argentinian beef, to come back to the United States, this whole cycle of thousands of miles and pollution and destruction. And I don't know that we'll ever get that back. It's not just us crazy people that actually seem to hug trees and love them. This is Oxford University announcing about 1.5 years ago that there could be a tremendous impact on air pollution and air quality and global warming and all the rest by just doing meatless Mondays or meatless weeks or meatless lives. It's so powerful. And then just the horrible part that we know from watching things like Earthlings and Cowspiracy and other movies out there that have made the case, and the drones that are flying now about, there's just the horrible condition as Ocean talked. And truly, it isn't just men, it's just an overall insensitivity when we call it a fryer and we don't call it a hacked apart chicken. So, children are being, led to believe that there's no relationship between what they're eating and the cute little animal in the backyard when it's all the same. We're not perfect. We're just trying to do it a little better. I try vigorously to try and stay kind, but sometimes social media doesn't permit it. You just have to be strong with the data because they're strong. But where can we get into problems? We can get into problems. We know there's data out of the Harvard School of Public Health that if your diet resembles a plant-based diet, but you can label it as largely processed food, food, you may actually be increasing your risk of cardiovascular disease. But if you will be smart enough to eat from the rainbow and from the produce department in your garden and the farmer's market, and the majority or all your diet being this wonderful acronym, whole food plant-based, I actually like whole food plant because based leaves too much room for sneaking in something else. Nonetheless, you actually dramatically drop your risk of developing the #1 killer of men and women. So that's one distinction. I want to talk about one last little topic. I did probably leave out a slide about the need for supplementation. I personally believe, as a physician drawing blood levels on patients for so many years, vitamin D, B12, and probably an algae-based omega-3 little capsule, as Dr. Michael Greger recommends, and I wholeheartedly endorse that, to be a healthier, better, more complete plant eater. I will say the lowest B12 level I've ever seen in my life was a lab value I looked at yesterday on a meat-eating patient of mine. It does happen on the other side of the aisle, but we would be better for our own health and better as a plant community if everybody just raised their hand and said, I don't take metformin, I don't do chemotherapy, and I don't do blood pressure pills, but I do take vitamin D, B12, and algae-based omega-3. So I want to talk about fasting for a minute, because being plant-based doesn't mean we can't accept new innovations. We have an infrared sauna display here. I'm a gigantic fan of infrared sauna based on quite amazing science out of Japan. We have a supplement company there, and I have some knowledge there. But not everybody eating plant-based, and even doing plant-based right with the whole food and the supplements, is as thin as they want to be, has the blood pressure they want, has the blood sugar they want, has had the response they want. And in fact, I coined a term, I don't know that it's all that famous, hashtag vegasm. Sometimes when you're in this field and you're in the airport and it says vegan, you run and you eat it. You're not hungry, but it says vegan. It's your moral obligation to support the industry and eat everything. And it's hard sometimes. So, if anything, we do overeat as a nation. We do overeat, 700 calories a day more than we used to. And we have circled back to this recognition that we used to be hungry sometimes, and we used to actually have mechanisms in our body that turn on when we fast and are hungry, and they're extremely powerful as anti-aging and healthful mechanisms. And some of us have never done this because we've never gone more than 12 hours without eating, and in fact you can plan this in, and it's a plant-based victory. So I'm introducing you, if you don't know, to probably the leading light in nutrition research in the world, a man nominated last year for the Nobel Prize in Medicine at age 48. He's also the cutest single scientist in the United States. He's right there at USC, so go run. But for 20 years, he's been doing research how individual nutrients, how an amino acid called serine or an amino acid called methionine causes pathways that create aging and disease to be activated, and what foods they're in. And he's just taken a deep dive on nutrition, aging, and overall health on a very biochemical level. And what he rolled the dice on, I know it's a little tough science, but he started studying yeast, single simple cell organism, while everybody was studying mice and rabbits. And he said it's too complex, their whole organism. So he took these little yeast and he found all these pathways that, if interrupted, slow down aging and extend life. You can make a yeast live 10 times longer than normal by cutting back its calories. You can make worms and flies live twice as long by cutting back calories. And all these pathways are largely Dr. Longo. The roll of the dice was we have exactly the same pathways, and they've been preserved through generations and generations and generations. And when we cut our calories back, we slow down very fancy names called IGF and mTOR, something called PKA over here, FOXO, and these are fundamental to whether we're aging rapidly or aging slowly or get disease. And he, in fact, has created a diet. It happens to be a plant diet that reduces calories, reduces protein, has very specific content so that you're actually eating, but the response of the body is as if you're fasting. It's soups, it's bars, it's teas, it's drinks, it's snacks. I apologize, it has to be called plant-based because there is honey in one of the food bars. But you do it 5 days in a row, in a month, and then you go back to your healthy diet. So it's a 5-day intensive dive of about 800 calories a day. It is not a water fast. It is a fasting mimicking diet is what that stands for. And it has been shown to do unbelievable things. It might be for you the thing that breaks you out of a bit of a rut. I've been eating plant-based, but I don't get the response I want. This has been published in Humans, February 2017, in a very highbrow journal, Science Translational Medicine, starting with yeast, showing you can increase your lifespan, mice, you can increase their lifespan. Humans, all we can say is it appears we can lower the risk of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, and aging. So what did they find by feeding people 5 days in a row? And that's the key. It's a fasting. It's not intermittent fasting. It's called periodic fasting. Every month for 5 days, as often as you want to do it. If you entered that study and you had some blood markers that suggested you were at risk for heart disease or diabetes, body weight goes down as much as 10 pounds. Abdominal fat, right where we want it to leave, goes down. Waist circumference goes down. Cholesterol, triglycerides, blood pressure, fasting blood glucose. A marker of cancer growth called IGF-1 goes down. Unbelievable. You eat your way into a lower risk of cancer. Inflammation goes down. And most amazingly is that stem cells, which people are going and paying $25,000 for or $5,000 for or whatever, stem cells get released. Not if you fast for a day, not if you fast for 12 hours, not even if you fast for 2 days. But when you fast for 3, 4, 5 days, and he cut it off at 5 because of tolerance, you'd get more if you went a little further, that you can actually release a massive flood of stem cells into your blood for about 3, 4, 5 more days. And right now this is being used at the Cleveland Clinic and Mayo Clinic all through Europe, being studied in chemotherapy, multiple sclerosis, brain diseases, diabetes. There already are human data that are encouraging. Much more study needs to be done. But it has really come on the list as a plant-based anti-aging science game. It is ketogenic. This is the ketogenic diet you should study, a fasting mimicking diet of plants, because you do get ketotic on day 3, 4, 5. I've done this about 9 of the last 15 months. I love it. I've dropped 25 pounds like a switch turned on, and they just stay off. So you maintain healthy levels of markers you want. You increase markers that you would like to have, a leaner body mass. You keep your muscles. You increase your stem cells, but you lose abdominal fat. All peer-reviewed science. So it may be easier to move that in early and forget that, and really stay well. So back to that idea as I close down. Nutrition is the core. Jack LaLanne said it was the queen to the king of exercise. I think most of us would say you can't out-exercise a bad diet. Eating right is the foundation. Exercise, rest, and stress. We heard about plastics, the environment, water quality, personal products, the dirty dozen, EWG, and all the rest. And, you know, letting healthcare do what they do, but this is going to offer you so much in your life so that you can move from the pharmacy to the pharmacy and get yourself in better shape. Anyways, we've got vegan for the animals, the planets for ourselves. I appreciate the opportunity to come out here. I'd love to have some questions, but you're doing exactly the right thing. Don't second guess it. You have to stay a student, though. You've got an amazing book called Goodbye Lupus by Dr. Goldner. It's one of my favorites. I have piles of it in my office because it gets people started right away on an incredibly intense and wonderful plan that only her authentic, story could lead us to. Tom's new book, #1, is great, The Plant-Based Solution, and my book just before that, Vegan Sex, is kind of a science and a fun read together. Get involved in social media and follow credible people like Dr. Clapper and the other people, Angie Sadeghi and such, because really, we don't want to mess you up, and we don't want to mess us up. We actually want to do well. We are physicians and care a lot about this. So I thank you so much for letting me share the message. And go check your earlobes later today. Thank you. Happy birthday. Either all your hands are up or none of your hands are up, but I can't see.
I have a client that says that her blood work actually says that she has a gene that requires animal flesh.
Okay.
Is there such a thing as this?
Are they her genes or? Okay.
No.
So the short answer, long answer. Let me do the short answer first. There are questions we don't know the answer to, and if we had 5,000 people that we could feed exactly the balanced rainbow whole food diet, and 5,000 people that we fed a clean, let's say, paleo diet with venison and green leafies and no grains and such. Would everybody on the plant-based diet thrive and hit their goals and feel well and sleep well and clear up their acne? There'll never be such a study. All we have are these testimonials in medical journals saying what plant-based nutrition can do, and we got testimonials and very little actually medicine on the other side about how anybody follow or know who Dave Asprey, the bulletproof coffee, put butter and MCT, is a close friend of mine, and I'm slamming him because he deserves it. But, you know, it's like the story. I was vegan forever, and I did it perfect, and I couldn't keep my weight on, and the minute I ate meat, my energy came back. This is your friend. So, I mean, truly, we don't know. There's no scientific pathway we know of that identifies that there are people that need meat and will thrive. It may be so, but we don't know that. The blood type diet was proposed a dozen years ago. The book never had science then. It doesn't have science now. The author said he was going to publish his science. He has never done it, just like the book, The Plant Paradox and Legumes. Dr. Gundry says he's going to publish his science. He just keeps making money. He hasn't published his science. These are, you know, much more commercial people than they are healing the nation. There is a gene called ApoE. ApoE is a cholesterol modality. You can ask your doctor. It's covered by insurance, at least in my patients. I just put high cholesterol as a diagnosis. If you inherit ApoE4, your mother and your father give you this gene, and if you inherit ApoE44, as opposed to, that's the genetic roulette you'd rather not get, as opposed to ApoE3 or E2, it does dramatically increase your risk of cardiovascular disease and of Alzheimer's, and you will raise your cholesterol much more rapidly if you eat saturated fat of animal origin. So if perhaps she's got ApoE3 and somebody told her, oh, you have the gene that tolerates saturated fat, that doesn't mean you should eat it, but that's the closest we can even get to being there. The answer is, if you have that ApoE4, what do? You read an amazing book called The Alzheimer's Solution by Dr. Shirzayat Melinda. You exercise, you eat plants, you put turmeric, you sleep at night, you do some brain games, and you wait for the future because it's amazing innovations coming down the road, without a doubt. But the data that brain disease is heart disease, is diabetic disease, is cancer risk, and that a whole food plant naturally low in salt, oil, sugar diet is very good for the brain is extremely, extremely strong argument. I think there's another hand. Yes. Congestive heart failure, a very serious heart disorder. It's a diverse disease. Not everything's the same. You can have a heart attack and have congestive heart failure, or high blood pressure, or you can have it after pregnancy, and there's all kinds, and you can have it for no reason. Until very recently, I'd have to answer that question with plant-based nutrition, no. But just in March, there was a study published in a presentation, it's not yet published in a medical journal, at the American College of Cardiology, that indeed suggested that you can improve congestive heart failure. Now, it only makes sense, although the data is preliminary for sure, because it's going to be a diet richer in magnesium, and magnesium is an incredibly heart-supportive nutrient. It's going to be lower in, pesticides, herbicides, toxins, heavy metals. We heard a little bit before, I think Gina said, get checked for mercury, lead, arsenic. There is some data that some congestive heart failure is due to heavy metals. And we just, fish and mercury, it's there. I check mercury levels in my patients. They're eating at the fanciest restaurants in Detroit, and they're loaded with mercury. In fact, one of my closest friends, a general surgeon, just found out that his level was sky high. Couldn't figure out for a year why he was feeling bad. So these are real issues. I'm also an integrative trained physician, so I deal with congestive heart failure with food and other things like coenzyme Q10 and infrared sauna. So there are things that can be done. But you'd be far better to eat plants for the rest of your body, even if necessarily your congestive heart failure isn't, remedied. It probably will be, though. We good? We good? Oh, I can't see. Shout it out.
You talked about the fasting mimicking diet. Can you compare and contrast that to water fasting for 5 days?
Yeah. So I don't know when Dr. Klepper did talk yesterday, right? Yes. And did he talk about water fasting? Okay, because he had 7 years at True North and a deep experience with it. I've not been to True North. I'm certainly very familiar with and friendly with Dr. Goldhammer and Dr. Lyle and Chef AJ and all the wonderful people there. Dr. Lim, one of the new guys there. It's tough. So the difference is, number one, almost all water fasting is inpatient treatment. I mean, you're at bed rest, you're being observed, particularly if you have health reasons to be trying to use water fasting to reverse a condition. So you're not functioning. Fasting mimicking diet, you go to work. Every day I do it, I'm working full schedule. I cut my exercise back to just some light yoga because I'm not going to, there's two reasons to do that. One, I'm eating 800 calories a day. I'm not going to go run 4 miles. And number two, you're actually trying to repair your body. And when you're exercising vigorously, you're doing some damage that needs to be repaired. It just doesn't make sense during a 5-day period of rejuvenation and regeneration to necessarily break apart muscle and such. You're trying to actually do the opposite. Amount of scientific interest right now in fasting mimicking diet, about 100 times higher than water fasting. It's just more accessible, it's more doable, it's being studied all over for inpatient care with chemotherapy, for outpatient general rejuvenation and medical conditions. The story's not told when we, next 5 years, seeing studies ongoing in multiple sclerosis and the rest. But in mice, if you've got multiple sclerosis and you follow a mouse program that was developed by Dr. Longo, you actually regrow on your nerves the myelin sheath, and you stop having multiple sclerosis. There is a study out in humans that you feel better if you do it with multiple sclerosis. There's no nerve biopsy data at this time, but studies are ongoing. Other differences, 800 calories a day versus 0, that's pretty obvious. I'm trying to think of any others. It's just a much wider market. Already tens of thousands of people worldwide have followed Dr. Longo's program, and I don't have that number for water fasting, but it's relatively still difficult to access a high-quality water fasting clinic. They're out there. I'm speaking at a meeting June 30th in Cleveland called the National Health Association that Dr. Joel Fuhrman's one of the founders of. It's got a very long history I never knew of, but it's all about water fasting plus. So I get to meet some very cool people there that have been doing this for generations, but it's all kind of novel to me. Yes. Question, cartilage in the body and plant nutrition. There's a little wee bit. I gave grand rounds. I don't get invited to give grand rounds at cardiology departments in Detroit. Or if I do, they serve Egg McMuffins to the residents while I'm speaking about plant nutrition. And that's the honest to God truth. But I gave just recently to the orthopedic surgery department because they were interested in perioperative care. And there are a few studies about not necessarily connective tissue, autoimmune, but just degenerative joint, bone-on-bone conditions and improvements, at least clinically. So it makes sense in this Linus Pauling vitamin C story. You do not need bone broth and collagen to build up your collagen. You need vitamin C-rich foods, which are fruits and vegetables, and you need lysine-rich foods, which are nuts, almonds, lentils, and you will have very, very healthy collagen in your body for your skin, for your hair, for your organs, for your joint spaces and such. Now, I don't know. Nobody's ever said you can grow them back if you've broken them apart by either diet or exertion or, the biggest risk is being overweight and just pounding on joints day after day after day. Yeah, so why did Finland get the light in 1970, 71, 72? And I'm going to do a really bad job, but there's a young man at the time named Pekka Puska. I really do think that's his name. It's very close to that. If you do look at my Dr. Joel Kahn Facebook page, my professional page, the article about his whole history is yesterday morning. Fascinating. It's a long article, but it's well worth looking at. I'm also crazy on Twitter at Dr. Kahn, Dr. J. Kahn. It's ugly. You have to actually, have to realize I'm a nice person, but I attack people aggressively, and Instagram's all happy. Instagram, everybody's perfect all the time, but my dog gets on Instagram. Actually, Dr. Goldner got on Instagram with me today with a great Instagram story. But Pekka Puska was a doctor with a master's in public health at a very young age who was involved and aware of one of the most controversial topics was Dr. Ansel Keys, was he the Satan or the savior of American health? So since we have a couple minutes, but Dr. Ansel Keys, born in the United States, trained in Minnesota, went to England to get one PhD in the early 1940s, maybe late 30s, then went to La Jolla and got a second PhD in marine biology and went to Harvard and went to Cambridge and had this incredible education on nutrition by that point. Very interested in starvation and did some work in World War II on starvation, helped actually learn how to refeed concentration camp victims without causing them harm. And long story short, he came back to Minneapolis and developed a lab and started studying executives in Minnesota in 1945 that were dying of heart attacks, kind of a presage to Finland. and then did this famous study from 1958 to 1970 called the 7-country study, that in a large study that predated the China study, saw observations of more animal protein and saturated fat in the diet, the higher the risk of cardiovascular disease. He never said sugar was good. He's lambasted now that he lived to age 101 and died in 2004. Like 3 years after he died, a rather evil author named Gary Taubes, you might recognize the name, Good Fat, Bad Fat, Good Calories, Bad Calories. It's very popular in the paleo movement. Started blaming Dr. Keyes for obesity in America by not identifying sugar as the problem, by misidentifying animal products as the problem. And to this day, that argument goes on, even though it's completely wrong. So that's the whole background. Pekka Puska was involved with this research group called the 7-country study and Dr. Keyes, and they just knew. They had, I mean, you know, people were dying of heart attacks in Minneapolis, in Finland, in North Korea, and they knew they needed a solution. It's no different today, but we talk about it less than they're talking about in Finland. You know, and it's actually probably more confusing now than ever because of a couple really bad studies that failed to find that animal saturated fat was correlated, things like chicken, eggs, and cheese, with heart disease. They were 2 really bad studies, but that's all you need to raise a question mark in the public mind when it's on the cover of Time magazine. And it was, you know, it seemed more obvious a few years ago, and now it's gotten confused. It's not confused, but it's confused for the public. So it is remarkable. And, you know, as soon as they saw progress, why would they possibly give it up? Yeah. Yes. Ocean has one, but if there's one in the back, I can't see.
She does.
You know, since everything is completely connected, I'm wondering if you have any input in regards to Alzheimer's.
Yeah, well, like I said, it's not my area of specialty. So I'll just reflect. There's 2 books that came out August and September 2017. One is The Darling. I go to meetings that are called functional medicine meetings, and 95% of the people in the room favor a meat-based paleo diet, butter in your coffee, grass-fed beef. It's the answer to all medical problems. It's better than eating a McDonald's every day. We all recognize that. So the darling of that group, led by Dr. Mark Hyman, Eat Fat, Get Thin, and others, who wrote the endorsement of my first book, and I keep trying to go to bookstores and cross it out. But he's a good man, but I don't know how good. Nonetheless, Dale Bredesen, MD, studied in San Francisco at a place called the Bucks Institute and developed a program. It's called Recode. Came out with a book called The End of Alzheimer's in just August 2017, July. It's a 36-step program and to reverse Alzheimer's, because he had 10 patients and he's published that he got 9 of the 10 even before Alzheimer's. It's called mild cognitive impairment. But he got them to test a little better with his program. Very preliminary research. And he tries to put people into meat-based ketogenic diets all the time. We can talk about, somebody asked me about ketogenic diets, I'll give a real quick answer. And a very other complex program with many, many, many supplements and exercise and sleep and meditation and the rest. The polar opposite is the book that came out 4 weeks later it's called Team Sherzai. If you don't follow him on social media, you should. Sherzai, Team Sherzai. Doctor and doctor, husband and wife, delightful couple. I think when they talked at the Plantrition Project in September, they so blew so many of us away with their data and their academic quality and their personal kindness. But they have a completely different book, and it's everything you'd want to read about. And I mean, it's as scientifically authentic as the other program, and it's plant nutrition, and it's dealing with sleep, and it's dealing with stress, and it's dealing with mind games, like I said, and fitness. So if you want to read a book, read The Alzheimer's Solution, follow the program. But if you're doing this, that's the beauty of the plant solution, is it will promote health in every organ in your body. Your GI tract, for sure, as we heard from Dr. Sadeghi. Ocean, you had your hand up? You can shout it out, I'll repeat it. Okay. No, it's a great question because it is such a common question. And it actually, I'm glad so much you asked it, because if you really go to the science, it's flipped to an advantage for the vegan. And we really need to start asking the question, why the heck are you eating so much protein? We should just go up to people and start asking it till they stop asking us the opposite. Because what the science has come out is number one, there is a difference in the science in the last 3, 4, 5 years between animal-based protein and plant-based protein. I showed you briefly some Time Newsweek magazine headlines, but they are repeatedly that eating a large amount of plant-based proteins, call them beans, call them peas, call them lentils, call them green leafies, call them flax seeds and such, nuts, that eating foods that are enhanced in protein from plants actually favor health, favor longevity, favor reductions in cardiovascular disease. Totally the opposite when you get to animal-based. And that's because protein is a really dumb word. Protein is a mixture of amino acids, and the content of meat and its amino acid percentages is very different than the content of amino acids in plants. And there's differences in plants. But you don't want to eat a diet high in leucine and high in methionine, and you don't have to write this down, but they're very rich in meats, and they trigger aging. There's this pathway called mTOR, and leucine and methionine, which are very rich in meat, will trigger mTOR that goes down and causes aging. That's why this little bar says you want to stop mTOR, but just eat a lot of meat and you'll activate mTOR and you'll cause aging. That is Nobel Prize, actually both awarded in 2016 and nominated in terms of Dr. Longo kind of science. So Dr. Longo is now saying, again, a number you don't have to really remember, but it used to be the dietitian said 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight protein. You weigh 100 kilograms, 220 pounds, that's 80 grams of protein. You better eat 4 of those builder block bars that are 20 grams, or grab, and that's probably plant protein, but you better grab a whole lot of meat protein. Dr. Longo is now advising half that, 0.4 grams per kilogram. So he has, based on this science, that at least until you're about 70 years old, as Ocean correctly said, that there may be a need as you get older to work a little harder to maintain your muscle mass, because you don't want to be a frail 82-year-old and fall and not have the ability to get up and function well. But at least for almost everybody in the room, until you're about 70, even 75, it's an advantage that plants have on basis less protein per plate of food and the right mix of amino acids. So the two people that are starting to flip this in the conversation on social media and the medical literature is one of the favorite darlings in the world in Los Angeles, Juliana Hever, plant-based dietitian. If you haven't picked up her new book, and her guy, Ray Cronise, who most of you don't know the name, but he's one of the brightest nutrition experts, plant-based, helped Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller lose his 100 pounds in 100 days, a book called Presto. Oh my God, if you're dealing with weight and you haven't read Penn Jillette's book, Presto, or the other person who's following Juliana Hever and Ray Cronice's plan and Penn Jillette's plan is the movie director who just had the heart attack 2 months ago. Oh my God, he's on social media everywhere, and I'm blanking on his name because Kevin Smith. Oh my God, he's dropped plant-based weight after a heart attack at age 45. His daughter was vegan, and he kept making fun of her, and he's like become the biggest advocate on social media in the last couple of weeks. But anyways, the low-protein diet is being taught now as the best diet until maybe advanced age. What do you do if you're 300 pounds and you're doing these calculations? You probably should use some estimate of your core body weight. Your adipose tissue doesn't need the extra protein. So, protein deficiency, other than people in the intensive care unit sick and, metabolizing burn units and the rest, is not a clinical condition. We don't see it. It doesn't exist. It's excess, overeating of every calorie group that's out there. And we have an advantage with plants. We have the right amino acids. We have the right amount of protein. And, we'll do fine, as was shown in Okinawa in the blue zones, where protein content's about 10%, and they thrive in the traditional Okinawan diet, Loma Linda and such. Great point. So why you eating so much protein is the T-shirt you should wear. Or if you go to Joy Cafe up in Westlake, and the T-shirt says, "Where do you get your cholesterol?" Where do you get your cholesterol? And I'm not suggesting you be aggressive, but if somebody asks you where to get your protein, you really should say, "Boy, you really don't read the news, do you? You don't know about the new data, and don't even talk about it. Just walk away. Just play with their deranged brain." Yeah.
Could you speak about a plant-based diet and how it affects heart arrhythmias, SVT, and AFib?
Yeah. So great question. What is and there are areas that we literally have no science. And that would be one. So actually more frequently as a cardiologist that still sees patients, it's atrial fibrillation, which is this incredibly huge epidemic of heart arrhythmia, but supraventricular tachycardia is another one. Essentially no direct data, but it's the same answer I gave for congestive heart failure. A lot of arrhythmia, not in you, if you're asking a personal question, is related to obesity and sleep apnea and the diabetic tendency and high blood pressure that come with obesity, which is more frequent amongst processed food, American meat-based eaters than whole food plant-based eaters. So, you know, if you're having atrial fibrillation or rhythm and you got a weight issue, get on a whole food plant-based diet. Hopefully you'll be able to drop some weight. You may have to throw some periodic fasting in, and your sleep apnea may resolve. Maybe you need the mask for a while. Maybe you can get by without it because you're losing weight. I have people that lose 10 pounds in 5 days with this periodic fasting program, and then they repeat it, and then 3 months later they're down 30 pounds, and they're so friggin' excited, and things feel better, and the blood pressure's better, and their snoring has gone, and you know, and they're on a path now. They've kind of taken a fast track. Directly, there's no scientific study to say, because some of SVT is an anatomic thing, and you just got to go up there and burn that little sucker with a catheter, but then you're cured for life. It's fun to burn them. Yeah, there's no such thing as raw ablation. You just got burned. Okay, Gina.
You ready?
We're going to give some crap away.
Yeah.